The mission I'm asking you to volunteer for is exceptionally dangerous. Take a look at the man beside you. It's a good bet that in the next 6 weeks, you or he will be dead. Everyone brave enough to accept this, step forward.
The following is a TDJ Productions podcast. Inspirational, motivational, life-changing, helping you take the right steps to reach your goals and fulfill your dreams. Here's the creator, producer, and host of Life Begins Today, Dale Jones.
I remember being on a flight a few years ago. It was one of those turbulent flights that we've all been on at one time or another. Just not a lot of fun. Passengers were getting testy and anxious, and we were all ready to get off of that plane. Well, after we landed, one of the flight attendants, who clearly recognized the general attitude on the plane, instantly released everybody's pressure and anxiety when she got on the speaker and said, "Hi, folks. Sorry about the rough landing. It wasn't the captain's fault. It definitely wasn't my fault. It was the asphalt." Yes, that's what she said. It was the asphalt. While I'm thinking about it, what did the football player say to the flight attendant? "Put me in, coach." Yeah, I've got more. What did the kamikaze pilot tell his students? He said, "Look, I'm only going to demonstrate this once, so pay attention." Okay. I'll stop. Welcome into Life Begins Today, the podcast. My name is Dale Jones. You can see why I never pursued a career in stand-up comedy, right? Actually, some of you probably know this. There is a stand-up comic currently whose name is Dale Jones. I don't know the guy. I've never met the guy. But clearly, folks, it's obviously not this Dale Jones. I've hosted some morning radio programs over the years, and each day I would do what I called my joke of the day. Clearly, it was the highlight of everyone's morning, right? Speaking of mornings, before I jump into our topic today, I would like to invite you to consider subscribing to my daily podcast. It's called Morning Motivation. You can find it. You can Google it, just Morning Motivation with Dale Jones. It comes to your inbox every Monday through Friday. So when you wake up in the morning, boom, there it is. First, let me tell you what it's not. Unlike this podcast, where we spend a little time learning some very important life strategies and principles, Morning Motivation is intentionally about 3.5 minutes long. The purpose of the podcast is to really help jumpstart your day. I give you some nuggets to consider even before you crawl out of bed. Listen, it's better for you than your morning cup of coffee to get you going. I promise you that. And a lot less expensive. You can Google Morning Motivation with Dale Jones, or you can click on my site at dalejones.live. You'll see a Morning Motivation link, and it's very easy to find. So take a listen and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss one episode of Morning Motivation. You know, one of my favorite movies, it was released back in 2001, is Pearl Harbor. I'm sure you've probably seen it. This is the version of the story that focuses on childhood best friends Rafe and Danny. Ben Affleck is in it, and it talks about, these two guys, how they both grow up together. They're kids, and they grow up together, and they become these superstar fighter pilots. And, of course, to sell movie tickets, there is the love story that they built into this war movie. That being said, the movie is based on the historical day of December 7th, 1941, a day that President Franklin D. Roosevelt said would live in infamy, referring, of course, to the unprovoked Japanese attack on our naval base in Hawaii. And in the movie, it feels like the attack seems to go on forever. And I'm sure there was a purpose for filming it that way. And honestly, the cinematic effects are pretty amazing. But my favorite part of the movie comes later. And again, based on historical facts, 4 months after that attack on Pearl Harbor, 4 months later, April the 18th, 1942, America retaliated with our own surprise attack, striking Tokyo. Now, this attack, which is referred to as the Doolittle raid, and it was named after Lieutenant James Doolittle. Alec Baldwin plays Doolittle in the movie. And you remember the scene where they're training the pilots who are now flying these huge bombers. They're training them to take off from the limited runway of an aircraft carrier. And I love the part where they are attaching medals from some of the fallen Japanese pilots at Pearl Harbor. They've taken their medals and they're attaching them to the bombs that they're about to drop on Tokyo. And just in case there's somebody listening to this who has never watched Pearl Harbor, I'm going to stop there and let you watch the ending. But for the next few minutes here on Life Begins Today, I want to talk about this Lieutenant Doolittle. What an amazing guy he was. After the Doolittle raid, and by the way, this part isn't covered in the movie, so just you can relax. I'm not going to spoil anything. But James Doolittle, after that attack, he survived, and he was eventually presented the Medal of Honor by President Roosevelt, and he was promoted from lieutenant to brigadier general. But who he was before this Doolittle raid is really what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. He had actually served, believe it or not, as a flight instructor during the First World War, but it is his contribution to aviation that I kind of want to focus on. Now, I'm not a pilot, nor have I ever played one on TV. But I have a couple of friends who are pilots, and aviation has really always interested me. And any pilot will tell you that probably the most important thing you have to learn to do as a pilot, especially today with the advancement of all the systems on the plane, the most important thing you have to do is to learn to trust your instruments. And that is where James Doolittle comes into the picture. You see, James Doolittle, who, by the way, looks nothing like Alec Baldwin, for those of you who watched the movie, he was a pioneer in developing instrumentation that would aid pilots in situations where their vision might be limited. Flying at night, going through fog, going through storms or clouds. Jimmy Doolittle wanted to develop a way for pilots to use technology to assist them from the moment they took off from the runway until their wheels hit the asphalt at the end of their flight. Remember also that this was still in the infancy of aviation for the most part. Planes were being developed. They were much more maneuverable. And they were flying at much higher rates of speed. And Doolittle knew that human pilots were really going to need this instrumentation, if for nothing else, just to keep them, help them keep their bearings, as we say. Even if you're not a pilot, you've all seen, either in a book or likely in a movie, that artificial horizon gauge on a plane. We've all seen it. Well, guess what? It was James Doolittle who was the very first pilot to test that instrumentation. He was also the very first pilot to do a blind flight using nothing but his gauges and instruments to take off fly, and land an airplane. So where am I going with all of this, and how in the world does it apply to our lives if we are not pilots? I'm simply using James Doolittle as an example of someone who recognized the importance of trusting the signals around him when he couldn't do something on his own. We need to do the same thing. We need to trust the signals around us when we can't do something on our own. His focus was clearly on aviators. Later in life, James Doolittle was involved in space science as well, but he understood that there are times when just our own human instincts are not enough. In just a basic example, we could say the same about our health. When we don't feel right, we have a choice. Try to move on forward anyway, hoping that everything will be okay, that we can handle it, which is what guys typically do. Or we can seek medical attention that may be able to find something, treat something, or maybe even cure something that we can't see on our own. What about in your personal life, in your relationships? Often when a relationship with a spouse or with a child or with a close friend, sometimes when those relationships go off the rails, we tend to want to let it ride, or we want to fix it ourselves, when in actuality the problem could very well be something that we just didn't see. And the same in business. No matter what level of the company you are situated right now, there are going to be times when you have to trust the instruments rather than trying to figure things out on your own. What caused the second quarter earnings to drop? Why is a specific client no longer ordering the same amount of widgets that he usually does? Why are your customer tips smaller than they were last year? Why are people canceling their subscriptions to your magazine or newspaper? Why is the boss not called on you for a special project? Listen, no matter what field you are in, there are going to be questions that you sometimes cannot answer on your own. And you have to look deeper, and you have to trust what the instruments of life are telling you. Bottom line is this: when you can't see what is ahead of you, you have two choices in facing any issue. You can use brawn and try to just fix it yourself, or you can use brains. Rely on what information is telling you. Trust that information. Use it to propel yourself forward, even if it goes against how you've always done it. Now, Jimmy Doolittle once said, if we should have to fight, we should be prepared to do so from the neck up instead of from the neck down. Trust life's instrumentation. Hey, listen, there is nothing wrong with trusting a gut feeling from time to time. But if I'm flying a plane and I need to land and I can't see the runway, I'm going to trust what the instruments are telling me. Same with business, same with life. Thanks for joining me today on Life Begins Today. We'll do it again next Monday. Hope you'll join me. Have a great day.